The flight attendant leaned slightly toward my seat and said something I didn't expect to hear. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your meal isn't available." For a second, I thought I had misheard her. I looked up from my tablet and gave a polite smile. "I pre-ordered it," I said calmly. "Lobster, bisque and filet. Menu." She glanced down at the small device in her hand, tapped the screen once. Tensrug. It must not have gone through. And just like that, she walked away. No apology. No attempt to fix the issue. No explanation. 10 minutes later, she returned carrying a tray. She placed it in front of me, without a word. A dry sandwich, and a plastic cup of water. I stared at the tray for a moment before slowly lifting my eyes and looking around the first-class cabin of Stratus Air Flight 917, traveling from New York to Geneva. 6 other passengers sat nearby. All of them were men. All of them older. All of them dressed in tailored suits that clearly cost more than most people's monthly rent. And every single one of them was being served exactly what I had ordered: caviar and champagne, freshly plated luxury meals. In that moment, a quiet realization settled in. I was the youngest person in the cabin, and the only woman traveling alone. My name is Ava Coleman. I'm 29 years old, and I run a technology company currently valued at just over $2 billion. On most days, I negotiate international acquisitions, review funding proposals, and manage development teams spread across 3 continents. But none of that seemed to matter in Seat 1A. To them, I was probably just another young woman who had wandered into first class by accident. I had seen that look before, the quick glance. The silent judgment. The subtle assumption that you couldn't possibly belong where you are. Normally, I ignore it. But something about this moment felt different. It wasn't only the missing meal, it was the dismissive shrug. The way she walked away before I could respond. The way every other passenger in the cabin was treated with careful attention while I was handed a sandwich like an afterthought. So instead of arguing, I reached for my phone. I opened a message thread and typed 3 words. "Start review protocol." My assistant Marcus replied less than 30 seconds later. "Which company?" I wrote, 1 line back. "Stratus Air Flight 917. Then I placed the phone face down on the tray table and quietly ate the sandwich. For the remainder of the flight, the cabin crew barely acknowledged me. They laughed with the other passengers, refilled champagne glasses, and offered dessert trays down the aisle. No one asked if I needed anything. No one returned to check on the meal situation. And that was perfectly fine. Because while the crew believed the situation was finished, it had only just begun. Somewhere, halfway across the Atlantic, my phone buzzed softly. Marcus filed multiple complaints. His message read, "Apparently, the same flight attendant who had served me had already received several reports from passengers in the past. Selective service. Favoritism. Dismissive behavior towards certain guests." But those complaints had never gone very far. Until now, because what the cabin crew didn't know, what none of the passengers on that aircraft knew, was that my investment firm owned 9% of Stratus Air. Not enough to control the airline, but more than enough to request a formal internal investigation. By the time the captain announced our descent into Geneva, Marcus had already compiled a full report. He forwarded it directly to the airline's executive board, along with a request for an immediate service audit. The plane touched down smoothly. Passengers gathered their belongings and moved toward the exit. The flight attendants stood beside the door with professional smiles. "Thank you for flying with Stratus." I stood, slipped on my coat, and walked past them without saying a word. But when the crew stepped off the aircraft moments later, the people waiting at the gate were not the usual ground staff. 2 members of the airline's human resources department were standing there. Along with airport security, their smiles disappeared almost instantly. I didn't stay to watch what happened next. There was no need for a confrontation. No dramatic scene. Sometimes the strongest message is delivered quietly. Later that evening, from my hotel room in Geneva, Marcus sent one final update. Crew suspended, full service audit initiated. I stood by the window and looked out at the city lights, reflecting across Lake Geneva. It was strange how small the original moment had seemed. Just a missing meal. Just a careless shrug. Just another young woman being underestimated. But small moments often reveal bigger problems. And sometimes the most powerful response is patience. Because the people who assumed I didn't belong in seat 1A that day had absolutely no idea who they were dismissing, and by the time they realized it, the consequences had already begun.